Welcome to a new BookTube video, and this is another tag. This is called the OK So Booksically tag, which I believe is a pun on its originator's BookTube channel name, which is he's Andrew at OK So Booksically, and I'll be linking to the origin video down below in the description. But actually, we saw this first on Sean the Book Maniac's site, and I'll link to that as well. Okay, on with the questions. Number one. Tell us about your user stroke blog stroke channel name and your real name. Well, the original name for this BookTube channel was a bit of a disaster because I thought I came up with an ever so clever pun called the Tome Raider. But unfortunately, Google Analytics and YouTube SEO don't see it that way, because you type in Tome Raider, spelt correctly, and they offer you lots of Lara Croft stuff, so you would never find me by typing that in. So I've just gone with my my actual name, which is Mark with a C Nash, only that's not my real name, that's my writing name. And while I'm not going to tell you my real legal name, not for any illegal purposes, but I'm just not going to share it because that's a side of my life that is not part of writing and reading. I did used to have another name because before I wrote novels, which was when my kids came along and I was doing most of the child rearing, I used to write stage plays, which meant I was out a lot hanging around at theatre bars trying to make connections. But I used to write those plays under the name of Gary Swing. And the reason I chose that name was Gary was always a name I'd liked, so that was easy. But Swing, back in the days when AIDS was just sort of breaking, I watched a documentary, and there was a religious man, a priest of some sort, somewhere in California, who had a largely gay flock. And I've never seen a man talk with so much compassion and mercy. And he was called the Reverend Swing. So I just thought, okay, that's going to be the other part of my writing name. But when my twin boys came along and I couldn't hang out at theatre bars anymore, I stopped writing plays and I started writing novels. So I buried Gary Swing. He no longer exists, although one of my plays is in the British Library as a copyright library, and it will bear the name Gary Swing, but to all intents and purposes he's dead. And I'm now only Mark Nash, because I can't see that I'll ever go back to writing plays. Even though my boys have now grown up and are at university, so I could go and hang out at theatre bars, but the theatre industry has changed in 20 years. Question 2. Open Instagram search and chat about the first 3 images. I don't have a smartphone. I'm not on Instagram. I'm very active on Twitter and obviously BookTube, and Goodreads is the other one that I'm active on. I've done something like nearly 200,000 tweets, so if I had a smartphone and actually had connectivity on the move, I'd be lethal. That's part of the reason that I don't have a smartphone, and I'm not on Facebook because I leave that to my boys, because I feel if I was on Facebook it would almost be like sort of reading their diaries, which is what what people did in the old days before they put all their lives online. So I give them their space. It's I can't overlook what they're doing, looking over their shoulders online, so I prefer it that way. So I'm not on Facebook. Also, I dislike a lot of their how they handle our data. Question 3. Open YouTube and talk about the first 3 videos. Okay, I'm not going to include BookTube ones. These are sort of non-BookTube ones. The first one, and I'll post the links to these in the description. The first one is Mac the Knife, sung in German by Lotte Lenya. Now, Lotte Lenya was Kurt Weill's wife, and Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht wrote many plays which had a lot of music in. So they wrote, Brecht wrote the Threepenny Opera, and Weill did the music for it. And it's just a beautiful version that Lotte Lenya sings. And German's always sort of had significance for me in that it offers a lot of grammatical and sort of linguistic possibilities that English doesn't. Such as, when the word doesn't exist, they'll put together 2 or 3 words, conceptually to create a word to express what you're trying to express. And I wish we had that in English. And the fact that all their nouns, begin with capitals, whereas only our proper nouns, our names do. So I've always wanted to sort of write something half German, half in German, half in English, but I never learnt German. and it's probably too late now to try and get a new language across my fading mental powers. But I have written a short story about sort of applying German grammar to English. It's in one of my flash fiction collections. So that's the first one. The second one I had was, oh yes, In Conversation with Curtis White. So Curtis White is an author I've recently discovered. But there's not much about him on the internet, even though he's sort of an established postmodernist author. But one of the few videos on YouTube about him is a radio interview he did near where he lives, somewhere in the States. And he's talking about American politics. He's a cultural critic more now than a novelist. I'm not sure if he's fully hung up his word processor. And it's a fascinating interview. It's about half an hour, 45 minutes. So I've bookmarked it, so I can go back and listen to it again. And then the third one, so Lotte Lenya and sort of music theatre is not normally my style of music. And this next one I'm going to talk about is it's a band from Scotland called the Dog-Faced Hermans, and it's a track of theirs called Jan 9, which is a beautiful noise, basically. I like lots of different genres of music. I worked in the music business for 19 years, but my favourite is what I call art noise. So it's bands like the Dog-Faced Hermans, Godflesh, Einstürzende Neubauten, people like this. It's a new album from the Dog-Faced Hermans, and this was one of the tracks off it, and it's great. So that's the three things on my YouTube. 4. Your favourite song to learn and listen to while reading and writing, and how many plays it's got. Okay, well, first of all, I can't listen to music when I'm reading. I have to have silence to concentrate. Now, I can read on the London Underground, which is hardly quiet, but I can't have music on when I read. And yet when I write, I have to have music. And the way I do that is basically when I sit down to do a first draft of any new project, I choose, I suppose, like a mixtape or a playlist of songs that are relevant in some way to the novel, and that's all I will listen to for the entirety of the first draft. And there's a couple of things to that. One is that, for example, my debut novel was set in Greece, and it was about sort of British tourists there and how they sort of colonise other countries and turn it into sort of Little Britain abroad. So the soundtrack for that was a mixture of Greek rebetika music, which is kind of the Greek blues from the Greek communities that were sort of booted out by the Turks. And that was mixed with sort of trance music, which I really don't like, but it's what clubbers were listening to at the time, or not listening to, dancing to at the time, in these sort of overseas resorts. So it was a mixture of those two things. And the way I think it works psychologically is when you break at the end of a writing session, you go back the next day. If you put the music on, psychologically it takes you straight back in there. You're in the atmosphere and the tone of it. And also I think that the music permeates it in unconscious ways about the rhythm. But I did write one of my novels after that, specifically with music. It's a sci-fi sort of time traveller book called Time After Time, sort of based on all the flaws of the Terminator logic of travelling back in time to kill someone in the past in order to alter your future. So that was my premise. Only the guy who comes back, he's coming back from a future world ruled by women, so where all the men are emasculated, and he comes back to the past to sort of terminate the woman whose ideas sort of led to this down the line. But because he's emasculated, and where she lives is a really rough council estate, the equivalent of the projects in many American cities, and he doesn't have the powers to sort of survive there. So he tries to get guns and stuff to sort of help him on his way. And the book itself is he has to get up close and personal to her. So it's like a series of seduction scenes, but using the principle of the butterfly effect, a slight change in how their seduction goes, and it leads to a totally different outcome. So there's about eight versions of the seduction scene, and each one is slightly different. But anyway, there's a character in there who's in the council estate on top of a high rise, who has a sort of pirate radio station, and all through the action he's playing these tracks which seem to sort of not only predict what's going to happen between them, but actually leads it. So I ended up with about a 45 song playlist from this book. So what I did is I compiled a Spotify playlist and I linked it in the book so that you could actually hear these songs while you were reading. And those are the songs I was listening to while I was writing it. So music is quite important to my writing, but I'm afraid I can't use it when I read. I can't concentrate. 5. Favourite book on your shelf at the moment? I don't quite understand this question, because if a book's on my shelf, I haven't read it. Because as soon as I've read books and reviewed them, I put them away in my garden shed, which is my sort of official bookshelf, because I don't have shelves in the house because it's too small. So I don't know what my favourite book would be. I suppose I do have a cupboard where books are in transit where I finished them, but I haven't taken them outside yet. So that would be a David Markson trilogy with This Is Not a Novel, Vanishing Point, and The Last Novel, which is just a brilliant, brilliant read. A book I wish I'd written, but obviously he got there first. Okay, question 6. Favourite bookish thing you love using as a prop in your pictures and videos? Okay, well, in case you haven't noticed, I'm lo-fi, I'm gonzo, I'm no frills, I don't have lighting. I don't have an external camera and tripod. What I use is the FaceTime camera on my little laptop, and I've got a £7 microphone. So there are no props. There's nothing. It's just, to me, it's all about the books. So sorry, I can't answer that question. Question 7. 3 books you are dying to reread but probably never will. Okay, well, the first is Murakami's book, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. I'm not a huge Murakami fan, but that book is brilliant because it's 2 seemingly unrelated narratives in different times and sort of different genres. One's a sort of detective and one's a sort of apocalyptic scenario. And the way he brings them together at the end is so stunning. And I just want to read it again just to, now that I know how it ends up and how these 2 things are related. I just want to read it and see how he does that throughout the novel, gets you there. Because I didn't see it coming, basically. And the second one would be the works of Jean Genet. I mean, I read them, I suppose, about 15, 20 years ago. And I remember I really liked them, but I can't really remember anything about them. I'm much more familiar with his stage plays, which I've read. But his novels struck me as very good at the time. But I can't remember anything about them. So I would like to reread those. Specifically, probably Our Lady of the Flowers. And the same is for my third choice, which is Jean-Paul Sartre, who I read his sort of philosophy book, Being and Nothingness, and I remember nothing about it, so it lived up to the title in a way. But I kind of would like to reread that again, just to, I think it went right over my head at the time when I read it quite young. It'd be good to reread that. But also he had a trilogy with Iron in the Soul, and I can't remember what the other 2 were called. And again, I've read them and I can't remember a thing about them. Were they good, were they bad? I can't even remember that. So I tend not to reread books because I just keep discovering new books I want to read, or books I've missed in the sort of the canon of stuff that I'm interested in. So I think of all of them, I would be most likely to read the Murakami. Okay, question 8. Amazing bookish finds. This can be books, bookish things, or bookish moments, not finds, but sense. Okay, I'm going to have to do a cut here because I haven't brought the books down with me, which is really stupid. So just bear with me. And so I return. Okay, so these aren't finds by me, but there's an element of find in them, which I'll come to. So a friend of mine in London sent me this book. Let's see if we can. You can see it. As you can see, I've not opened it. I'll tell you why in a minute. So it's a book called Joy Division by Kevin Cummins. Kevin Cummins was a photographer for the New Musical Express, which is a music paper in the UK. And Joy Division are my all-time favourite band, even though they're not Art Noise. And Cummins basically compiled this book of photos of the band. They were only in existence for about sort of 3 years before the lead singer committed suicide, and that was the end of that version of the band. And I will find, one day I will open this. It's all so precious, that's why I haven't opened it, but one day I will open it and I will find some amazing stuff in there. I'm quite familiar with the photos from sort of fanzines and stuff. But this is like a complete... In fact, it's coming away, so at some point I guess I will be opening it soon. It's collected a bit of dust there. And the same thing for this. Vladimir Nabokov's The Origin of Laura. This was given to me by a bookseller friend of mine who had a independent bookshop in London, and was very supportive to my debut novel. Unfortunately, he sort of decamped and gone to Canada with his partner, so he's no longer in the book trade. But he gave me this as a gift, completely unprompted. I mean, I don't know why, but it's fantastic. It's a novel in fragments, and the Independent on Sunday newspaper in the UK quote is one of literature's most fiercely guarded secrets, a great author's unfinished masterpiece that has lain deep within the vaults of a Swiss bank for more than 3 decades. So again, I haven't opened it, but one day I will crack it open to read it, and I will find brilliance in it, I'm sure. So those are my bookish finds. I'm afraid I don't really have things like, mugs, deck chairs with book covers on them, or bookmarks. Again, sort of lo-fi, I'm afraid. 9. Hottest authors or author crush. I'm not sure quite where this question's pitched. It seems to be one of two. Do we mean a crush on their literary skills, or do we mean actual concupiscent feelings towards them? So I'm going to play safe and go for the literary author skills. And the first one is Ben Marcus, who I've talked ad infinitum in other videos. I've got one dedicated to him. I will post the link to that. But he is the contemporary writer who I would most like to write like, although I write nothing like him. The second is Jarrett Kobeck, who I've only recently discovered, but is a brilliant writer, and one of his books I've just ordered. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds like he's sort of the inheritor of what David Markson was doing, which is sort of writing. I mean, Markson called one of his novels "This Is Not a Novel," and Kobeck's is called something like "If you can't be bothered to read, then I can't be bothered to write." And what they both do is they're not providing their own content. So Markson was providing sort of epigrams and factoids and quotes from other authors, artists, scientists, anyone who's ever been anyone. But it's the way he arranged them, and the little interludes where he did put in an author character, that actually the character bleeds throughout the whole book, even the quotes and stuff, by what he's chosen to present. And I think Kobeck's done similar, where he's sort of cold internet sex chat and things like that, and it's how he's arranged it will give the message that he wants to give. So I'm really looking forward to that. I haven't actually read it yet. And then the third one is Jeanette Winterson, who just writes the most lyrical, sumptuously rich in imagery books. I mean, they're novels, but they're kind of poetic. They're fantastic. And she's the only writer I've ever actually seen in the flesh, because I used to work in a record shop that was based in Brick Lane in East, sort of central East London. And she has a shop there, and I think she lives above the shop as well. So I used to see her occasionally, leaving her door and stuff. And I was too sort of shy to go and tell her how much I loved her books. But there you go. So I think that's it. I think I've answered all the questions. So thanks to Sean and Andrew for providing the tag. It was good fun. I'm sorry that I'm such a Luddite that I couldn't get into the spirit of some of the questions, such as the Instagram one, and also probably the bookish one. But I like things on the down low. Probably not great for a writer trying to make his name, but there you go. Hey ho. So till next time, thanks very much. Cheers.